Hello, wherever you are, all you good-looking people. Isn't that great? We don't have to look at each other. We can just assume you're so good looking. Like to encourage you, give you what encouragement I can right now for your recovery. Wish that it could go both ways, because man, I need all the encouragement I can get. But at least let me do this. Share with you something that has been coming up in discussions lately for me and people I'm talking with uh, about when do you ask questions and when do you act? When you're dealing with people who are hurting, uh, when do you ask them, what do you need? And when do you just look at yourself and say, I know what to do. I'm going to do it for them. Now, this comes up for us in recovery, in 12-step recovery, when we look at making amends to those we've harmed. Now, a lot of times in my groups, we spend a lot of time talking about what kinds of amends do people I've harmed need from me. And, sometimes it's really obvious. I took $20 from them, pay the money back. I lied to them, tell them the truth. There's times when it's really obvious, but then there's times, well, I remember in particular one man saying, you need to go to them and ask, what can I do for you to help make this right? Sometimes that's what's called for. It's not always cut and dried. I'm thinking of what Paul the Apostle wrote in Galatians chapter 6. I refer to this a lot. You've probably heard me talk about this before. Starting at the first verse, he says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they're not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Okay, you look at what Paul the Apostle is saying there to us. There's times when we are looking at people who are just stuck. They're in the dark. They're flailing around. They don't have the resources internally, externally to take care of their situation. We've had those times where we have to go to those people, help lead them by the hand, help show them, here's what needs to be done. Here, I'm with you. Here, I will love you through this. Here, God loves you. Here's resources for you. Uh, there's times when people are just so stuck, and we've all been there ourselves. So, yeah, having that kind of mercy. And then there's times when people, okay, you're not that stuck. And here are some things that you really need to take responsibility for yourselves. I think of all the conversations I've had, usually with well-intentioned mothers who are asking me, where can my adult child go for help with their addiction? Where can they get treatment for addiction? And I've learned over the years to say, wait a minute, how come you're asking me this question? How come you're a grown child isn't asking these questions? Uh, Usually they just hadn't thought about it. They're just, it's a loving parent's heart trying to do something for their child. But in the process, they've taken responsibility away from that person. They have taken ownership of that person's problem. So that person isn't going to grow. They're not going to make this their own recovery. Uh, what we need to do is encourage people who are recognizing I've got a problem. Encourage them. That's great. That's a good step. I'll be there for you as you work through this. Um, Anything I can do to help you feel like you're getting somewhere, I'm there for you. And I want you to grow and I want you to take ownership of this. And I'm not going to take that ownership away from you. So, there's a time to ask and there's a time to act. I think of one man I know who his child had been sexually assaulted, and well, he and his wife took the appropriate action. They got help for their daughter. They called the police. The man was arrested and charged, but of course the man was still struggling through this. And at one point he called the pastor of the man who had hurt his child and tried to tell him about the struggles he was going through. And the pastor said to him, "Well, what do you want me to do?" Okay, he asked that question of the man who was hurting. Um, you're a pastor. You're the pastor of the man who hurt this man's child. Uh, what do you think? Use your imagination. Hello? Okay, here this man wasn't taking responsibility. This pastor was not thinking, well, this is not the time to ask. This is the time to act. Act like a pastor. Well, that happens. We've all been guilty of it. I know I sure have. This is an issue for a lot of us right now, a lot of us white people, as we're becoming more and more aware of all the ways that people of color are hurting because of things done to them by people that look like me. Now, do you ask or do you act? Well, uh, we do want to ask. We do want to talk. We do want to say, how are you hurting? There's places where, and I'm just ignorant. I don't know what I'm doing. Educate me. Nothing wrong with that. If we're going to ask those questions, though, be prepared for the answers because it might hurt. Fine. There's a time to ask, but there's also a time just to act. What what does a person who's being abused need? Well, they need the abuse to stop. And if I'm a white guy, if white people are the abusers, what can I do as a white guy to stop the abuse? Come on, it's not rocket science. Ultimately, because Paul the Apostle is saying these things, he's always saying that with an eye toward the God of grace. And you think of what our God has done for us. He came to us when we were stuck, when we were in the dark, when we were just plain helpless, and said, I'm going to love you. I'm going to make you my own. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to live with you. You're going to be mine. He did all that for us when we were powerless. While we were powerless, Christ died for us. Paul wrote that in Romans. And he says, follow me. He doesn't just leave us in some kind of learned helpless state. He says, get up, follow me, learn, grow, walk. That's what our God does for us. And if we're going to follow him, we got to look around and say, well, what can I do for the people who are hurting around me? How can I love them in their stuck state? How can I encourage them to take their own action? Especially if the hurts were caused by me. What can I do? Don't put the responsibility on them for my actions. Do your job. Well, hope that in this coming week, as you look around and see people who are hurting, and when you recognize, ooh, I bear a responsibility in causing that hurt. I hope and pray that you and I, as we make those observations, that our God is going to work powerfully through us to empower people and to heal, just like he's been doing for us all along. He's brought those people into our lives. Let's be those people for somebody else. Well, have a God-blessed week, and let's just see if I can hit the right buttons now.